In the spring of 2026, starting on March 27th and lasting for exactly 40 days, China locked down a massive section of the sky over the Yellow and East China Seas. Look at this map of the region to see the physical scale of the restriction. The zone stretches from the ocean surface straight up into the stratosphere. It covers an area larger than the entire island of Taiwan. There was no press release, no claims of a rocket launch, no scheduled military drills. Beijing shut down one of the most critical air corridors on Earth without offering a single word of explanation. Veteran geopolitical strategist Ho Pin views this silence as a highly calculated maneuver. According to his analysis, the lack of communication is the weapon itself. By sealing off an empty patch of sky from the inside and throwing away the key, Beijing turned a physical vacuum into a massive psychological stress test for the entire region. To understand how a quiet sky causes damage, Ho Pin points to the physics of kinetic strikes. In modern weaponry, destructive power relies on extreme acceleration, driving a small mass into a target at high speed rather than relying on heavy explosives. Ho Pin calls this administrative speed. Unexplained blockades apply continuous pressure, testing if US-Japan defensive armor will crack. Initially, it's elastic deformation. The system bends but bounces back. Eventually, pressure holds steady. We enter plastic deformation, where the system permanently warps. During the first weeks, Washington and Tokyo launch diplomatic protests and deploy early warning aircraft. Pilots and radar operators are pushed into a relentless 24-hour operational tempo. Fatigue sets in, and high-end military hardware suffers permanent wear. The most brutal part of this equation is the math. It cost Beijing essentially $0 to issue a maritime notice. But to monitor that artificially empty space, the US military has to burn millions of dollars a day keeping its surveillance network active. They are forced to rely on heavy, expensive assets, like the RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft, P-8A Poseidons, and dedicated satellite tracking, flying around the clock just to watch an invisible line in the sky. This is what Ho Pin defines as an omni-domain attrition war. There is no lethal, explosive strike. You simply force your adversary into a corner where they bleed vast amounts of time, energy, and money to maintain the status quo. This strategy relies entirely on Beijing's refusal to speak. If they claim they are running a missile test or conducting scientific research, they invite immediate scrutiny under international maritime and aviation law. Offering zero explanation acts as a shield. Ho Pin refers to this as defensive arrogance. It creates high-level strategic ambiguity that leaves opponents guessing, forcing them to over-prepare for every possible scenario. The timing of the blockade confirms this intent. President Trump's planned diplomatic visit to China was originally scheduled for March, but got pushed to May. The 40-day airspace closure perfectly overlaps with that exact waiting period. The empty sky functioned as an unsigned diplomatic telegram. Beijing placed massive, costly leverage directly onto the negotiating table before the two sides even sat down to talk. The ultimate goal of this 40-day silent test is to reach the fracture point. According to Ho Pin, the armor finally shatters when the US and Japan become so financially and physically exhausted that they silently accept the restricted zone as a permanent reality. For Japan, that fracture point arrives quickly. Because the East China Sea sits right on its doorstep, military pressure instantly translates into a domestic crisis, forcing Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi to walk an agonizing tightrope between looking strong and avoiding war. For the United States, the threshold is higher, but the consequences are immense. If China can turn a 40-day closure into a regular quarterly routine, the US military won't be able to afford the constant surveillance. They will be forced to pull their forward reconnaissance assets back and shift into a dispersed defense posture. Pulling back those assets is a strategic retreat. It constitutes a quiet admission that the Allied hold on a local sector of the first island chain has failed. And this is Ho Pin's final verdict on the nature of conflict in 2026. The most devastating strategic victories no longer require firing a single shot or sinking a single aircraft carrier. You win simply by making your opponent realize that the cost of defending the sky is too heavy to bear.